Hey there, and welcome to What's the Story. We're an inquisitive bunch of hosts from the What's the Story team on a mission to uncover stories about faith and courage from everyday people. In doing that, we get the privilege of chatting with amazing guests and have the opportunity to delve into their faith journey, the hurdles they've overcome, and the life lessons they have learned along the way. If you enjoy our podcast, don't forget to subscribe and sign up for our weekly newsletter at our website, whatsthestorypodcast.com. It's your direct line to the latest episodes and detailed show notes delivered straight into your inbox. And the best part, it's totally free. What's the Story is brought to you by Crowd Church, who fully understand that stepping into a traditional church might not be everyone's cup of joe. Crowd Church provides a digital sanctuary, a safe space to explore the Christian faith where you can engage in meaningful conversations rather than just simply spectating. So whether you're new to the Christian faith or in search of a new church family, visit crowd.church. And if you have any questions at all, just drop them an email, hello@crowd.church. They would love to connect with you. And now let's meet your host and our special guest for today.
Today I am with Jonathan Lewis, who is the president of Eastport Financial Group Incorporated, author of Deep Water and More Than Money, and founder of Fathers for Fathers. His More Than Money podcast explores the stewardship of all our assets. He's a dedicated husband and father, lives in Nova Scotia, Canada, which is a beautiful part of the world, is passionate about his faith, family and community, as well as entrepreneurship. A man after my own heart, ladies and gentlemen. He and his wife Sarah invest in startups and support charities that model strong Christian values. Jonathan, great to have you on the show, man. I've been looking forward to this. Sadaf, who I know you've spoken to in the past, has been bigging you up. So great to finally connect. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing so good, man. I'm really delighted to be here. And Matt, I'm looking forward to chatting with you today as well.
Yeah, no, fantastic.
Yeah.
Absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
So you're an entrepreneur, you're an author, you're a podcaster. It's like you're my brother from another mother. It's
All the way over in New Scotland.
yeah, all the way in New Scotland. Yeah, I'm near the original one. You're
Exactly.
So it's an interesting one. Christian-wise, then, have you always been a Christian? Was it something you've grown up with, or is it something that came later in life?
Yeah, it's funny. I was just chatting with a guy today about this, and he asked me my backstory, and I said, well, I was exposed to what I would say is a culturally Christian family.
Yeah.
In Canada, there's not a lot of convictional Christianity, but there's a lot of cultural Christianity. And, we're not even a post-Christian nation anymore. I would say we're more of a pagan nation. And so I grew up where my dad was the first person in his entire family ever that anybody knew of to become a Christian. They thought he'd joined a cult. But he never really dug his roots of his faith in deep. When you think about the story of the parable of the sower, I would say my dad was the seed that got caught up in the cares of the world, and but it was enough to expose our family. And but I got saved, if you will, or had that coming to Jesus aha moment where I was like, "There's got to be more." It was when I was 34, so it was only 14 years ago in 2010, and but it was definitely like a fork in the road.
Yeah.
And I took the road less traveled, and it's not easy. I said to a friend of mine, like, Christianity is not for the faint of heart.
Mm-hmm.
It takes guts to live in Babylon, if you will, and really truly convictionally follow Christ and try and do things His way. There's a lot of times when you're making decisions or engaging in a conflict in a way that your flesh would never do, and you're just trusting Him for the outcome.
Yeah.
So So that's how I found my way. Didn't really have the deep roots, but at 34, had a lot of success in business and was like, you know what? There's just got to be something more than this.
Yeah. It's really interesting. Today I was listening to a podcast where they were talking about the rise of cultural Christianity. And it's an interesting that you've just used this phrase. I've not heard it used loads, but it's been coming up a lot recently. This idea that you would live a Christian lifestyle and identify with that, but not actually believe that Christ was born of a virgin, that he rose from the dead. But that you're trying to fill some kind of void somewhere which was left by the new atheism model. And so you've got this sort of rise of cultural Christianity, which I find quite odd, that people want to sort of live this life of Christianity. They want to do good, they want, and follow the teachings of Christ to an extent, obviously not the whole way. And it strikes me as Canada's, I mean, you use this phrase cultural Christianity. Is that something that you see a lot there? Is something that you're experiencing more and more?
I mean, I travel a lot, Matt, whether it's in Europe or the US or Canada. Let me put it to you this way. In John 6, Jesus feeds the 5,000, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you jump further down, it's a long chapter, you get to verse 64 or 66 in there. And he's really pivoted on everybody. They're like, oh man, this guy's great. We're going to use him to get rid of Biden or Trudeau or whoever, just choose your country. He's going to get rid of the Romans, right? Like we haven't changed. Nothing's changed, right? They had the Romans. We've got our leaders of the world today. So right away, human beings in our limited capacity in our flesh, we see Jesus on our terms, Jesus a la carte. What can Jesus do for us? He fed us physically. There's a physical need met. What other physical needs can he meet of ours? Like we're not thinking transcendent, even though Augustine said, like our hearts long to have God fill this hole in us. And so, he gets to the point where, he says, no, I'm the bread of life, and whoever eats of me will never ever go hungry. And it says, and then a lot of the people that were following his disciples, it says, a lot of them said, this is a hard teaching. And they walked away from him. And then he turns to our good buddy, our guy, Peter, right? What a train wreck. And yet he says, Peter, you're still here, right? And I feel like I'm a Peter, because it's like, there's just this response where he's like, well, you have the words of life. Where else would we go? So I want you to overthrow the Romans too, and takes care of the tax collectors. And I'm just a fisherman. I'm a business guy. But there's something way more here to Jesus than just Jesus on my terms, Jesus a la carte, Judeo-Christian cultural centers that we've built, where we want these wonderful moral teachings. But Jesus is like, no, I'm way, way more than that. And J.D. Greer, he's a pastor that I've gotten to know his ministry and a lot of the leaders under his ministry down in North Carolina. And I love when JD says, look, there is a throne and a cross in every human heart. And either Jesus is on the throne of your heart and you're on the cross, or you're on the throne and he's still on the cross. But at the end of the day, it's one or the other. And so cultural Christianity is, I'm still on the throne, but I want Jesus a la carte, Jesus on my terms. But it doesn't work that way.
No.
If you're truly going to be a disciple of Christ.
Totally agree. It's and that's one of the things I think I'm curious actually, before I say that, you've been a Christian 14 years. Is this something that you knew from day one? Is this something that you've grown into, this understanding of the lordship of Christ, as the Bible maybe would call it? This Christ sits on the throne. He actually does rule and reign. Where was that? Where were you on the spectrum, I suppose, the last 14 years with that?
I would say that in 2010, we don't have a lot of churches here. If we do, they're apartment buildings or microbrew pubs or restaurants now. So I literally was in the field right outside the house here on my tractor on a Sunday morning planting apple trees. And I just had this moment where I'm like, Lord, I don't know if you're there or not. But here's what I do know. If you're not, it's really a hopeless situation for all of us. And if you are, could you please reveal yourself to me? And I'm thankful that he did. So for me then, it was like, okay, I've had this contrition, this confession of sin, the basic tenets of the gospel, but I don't know him, right? So then you go on this journey. This is this journey with Jesus of discipleship, where he's holding our hand and he's not going to let go of our hand. It's us that will pull away.
Yeah.
Right. And so he took me on this journey from 2010 to 2018 where like he knows each and every one of us. And one of the most powerful things I think that points to the existence of Christ is how he meets each person in such an intimate way. Right. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And for me, there was two idols in my life, or two things that I struggled with. One was, can I trust God? Because I've had a lot of abandonment and letdowns in my life.
Right.
And the other was, do I have any idols in my heart that are above him? And family was an idol to me, right? So we often think of idols, we don't think of family. As a matter of fact, in our world today, we celebrate people that are, doing a great job with family and that have family, but it can still be an idol to them. And so he worked away over the next 8 years at me on that, and it still is. And but I got to a point in August of 2022 regarding our two teenage daughters who we've had tremendous difficulties with. And just to give some quick context, when I got saved, my wife at the time decided she didn't want to be married and pursue another alternative relationship, where ultimately I was like, holy smokes, I didn't see this coming. And now I've got to try and save this marriage. And the failing that, I've got to try and co-parent and raise these kids in the wake of that. And by the grace of God, I was able to continue to thread that needle all those years with her. But these teenage girls now, right? They're trying to figure out their way in the world, and they're like, well, mom's view is this and dad's view is this. And I got to a point in August of 2022 where I'm like really desperate. I'm like, Lord, I've honored you. I don't understand why I feel like I'm on the losing end here with these girls. And in my quiet time in prayer in August 2022, he said, do you trust me? And Matt, I would love to be able to say that I had an emphatic response of yes, Lord, but my response was tears.
Yeah.
And it was further tears of contrition.
Yeah.
So this is like 12 years into my walk with Christ, because I knew that the answer was not an emphatic yes. And I knew that my flesh was still governing this idol of family, and that I was fighting in my flesh instead of trusting him. And so he took me on a journey over the last 2 years where I can honestly, emphatically say, with the girls and really with family at large, the answer is yes. And I'll tell you this, when you can say you trust him with whatever that idol was, you definitely trust him with everything else. Mm-hmm. Right. And so that's where he's holding our hand, and we have this reflex to want to pull away when it gets hard, when he's asking us to take the next step. And it's that step of, you got to choose now. Is it Lord of all or not Lord at all? Mm-hmm. Right. And my challenge to anybody listening to this is take the narrow gate, like choose Lord of all. If you can lay your idol down, you won't be laying anything down. That's the weird thing. It's like, it's the most painful thing to lay down that idol when he asks you to do it. And yet, really, you're not laying it down. You're just giving it to him. Mm-hmm. And he loves you so much that he's not gonna leave you hanging.
Yeah.
And so that's been this journey, if you will, around my idol. And so I manage money, lots and lots of money. And I deal with affluence, and yet money's never been my stumbling block. Like whether it's asceticism or materialism, pride of not having it, pride of having it. I can teach on money all the time. We do journeys of generosity. I've got clients and friends that run $600 million companies and pay themselves $100,000 a year. A good buddy of mine recently said, I did 500 million in sales last year, and I long time ago settled on there'd be no jet for Jeff. And so, some people, that's not their idol. Mm-hmm. And then God chooses to trust them with what for a lot of us is a stumbling block. Yeah. All right. But it's what makes our Savior so amazing, because he meets Matt with what Matt needs to have chipped away at Matt's character, Matt's flesh, just like he met Jonathan with, do you trust me?
So when you felt God say that to you in your quiet time, and obviously
Mm.
there's that moment of realization that actually God's asking this for a reason, and
Yeah.
I'm not quite where I need to be.
Yeah.
What was your response? What happened practically? How did that
Yeah.
outwork?
So I felt gypped because the girls were really running in the wrong direction. I was asking him to stop them, right? Uh, Help me save these kids. And and I was kind of like an Elijah stoop, like where I'm like, I'm so tired. I've done everything you asked me to do, and I didn't take on any prophets of Baal, but I definitely had done a lot, and I just wanted to lie down and die, and he just so graciously came alongside Sarah and I, and just comforted both of us in our pain, and our pain was different, right? As husband and wife, and that's my wife, who I've been married to for 10 years, amazing stepmoms, been in the kids' lives since they were
Yeah.
3 and 4, and poured into them, and she was having her own pain and suffering around this, and it's the weirdest thing. He then said to me, I need you to write a letter to the girl's mom, and I want you to tell her that you're sorry. I want you to ask for her forgiveness. And of course, my flesh is
Hmm.
like, "Are you kidding me? Like, I don't owe her an apology,
Yeah.
right?" And for 3 weeks, Sarah watched me wrestle with this, right? And so this is the next big thing when it comes to Christ, is when he says, "Forgive us our trespasses, we forgive those who
Hmm.
trespass against us."
Yeah.
We actually go back to the Hebrew translation. Those are actually commands. It's not suggestions. Like, he's
Hmm.
telling us this is what has to happen. And For 3 weeks, man, I wrestled with this. Like, I was just like, I can't believe you're asking me to do this, Lord. And then finally, I said to Sarah one day, I'm going to write this letter. And she's like, wow, okay. And so I sat at the kitchen table, and I wrote this letter, took a picture of it, went down to the mailbox. Ironically, I'm like 4 or 5 houses down from my ex-in-laws, so the mailbox is on their road,
Right.
and I'm sitting in front of the mailbox, and I post this letter, and I'm sitting there staring at it. I got my ear pods in, and Sarah calls me on my phone, and she says, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, if I'm being honest, I'm wondering what the felony charges would be for destroying a Canada Post mailbox and trying to get a letter back." But I said, I'm not going to go there. It's posted. And she said, "Okay, well, I'm proud of you, and our
Hmm.
Father is proud of you. Jesus is proud of you. Um, how do you feel?" And I said, "Well, I actually feel like a massive, massive load has been lifted off of me."
Oh, wow.
And she's like, "Good, come home." And so I did. Um, and it didn't stop there. Then he said, a couple months later, leading up to Christmas, "I want you to write her a letter and tell her that you forgive her, and that you hope that she has the best Christmas ever, and really mean it." And that letter was way easier to write, and I did, and I actually meant it.
Hmm.
And I can honestly say that, last summer he said, "Hey, do you know you're the only Bible she's ever going to read? If you don't pray for her, who's going to pray for her? I
Yeah.
want you to intercede for her." And I can genuinely tell you that that is a person who success, if I were to define success for the girl's mom, is that we would be standing shoulder to shoulder in eternity.
Hmm.
And that's when you know that you are being transformed by a transcendent, eternal Savior. Because, and anybody listening to me that's gone through divorce, which is 6 in 10 of your audience, by
Yeah.
the way,
Yeah. A lot.
um,
Yeah.
I know that this is resonating, because it's like, um, forgiveness is never the guy that you cut you off in traffic. You forget all about that, even if you had road rage. Forgiveness is always going to ultimately be difficult, and it's going to be somebody that was close to you,
Hmm.
that hurt you,
Hmm.
whether it was a business colleague, a sibling, a parent. It's never going to be somebody that's distant from you. This is a person you're going to be emotionally engaged with, and yet Jesus says, forgive them.
Yeah.
So, but I think that the next hallmark is that genuine state of letting go. It doesn't mean that this person doesn't make you angry again, or do something to tick you off, right? But it means that you're in a place where you're no longer held
Yeah.
captive.
Yeah.
you're no longer drinking poison and waiting for that other person to die,
Yeah. Yeah.
as we've all heard. And with that freedom, then comes the ability for God to say, okay, now I can actually use you, right? I can use you for my kingdom. I can take you deeper into your understanding and knowledge of me. But otherwise, you're stuck in that cultural Christianity vortex of,
Yeah.
I want Jesus, but I'm not prepared to really go the distance with Jesus and
Hmm.
trust him. And I mean, if we had more time in this podcast, I could tell you what happened in response to that. That is just amazing. And not just in one area of my life, but in many areas of my life, including
Yeah.
business. And so, um, yeah, I mean, Matt, if there's people listening, um, um, if you're struggling with forgiveness, do whatever you got to do to get around believers that are mature, that have stories, that have forgiven.
Yeah.
Read Corey Ten Boom. I mean, there's a great book to
Oh,
start with, The Hiding
geez. Yeah.
Place,
Yeah.
right? But I think about Unbroken, right? The story of oh shoot, what's his name? He was the Olympic track star who ended up in a Japanese war camp, and what he went through was horrendous, and he ended up getting saved. Louis Giglio, not Louis Giglio. It'll come to me, but just look up Unbroken. Amazing book, amazing story. But he ends up going back to Japan after the war and
Yeah.
forgiving all of his captors. And just there's this constant recurring theme of believers that are set free by setting others free in their heart.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
yeah,
That's such a powerful thing to say. And if you are listening, you want to know more, there is some great teaching actually on the Crowd website about it. Some amazing
yeah,
stories. Mick and Lynn Connolly, they're a local couple here in Liverpool. Their son was murdered, a case
yeah,
of mistaken identity.
yeah.
Their story about forgiveness. And you're right. You listen to some of these people and you just go, well, I've got nowhere to go. You know,
Yeah,
I,
it almost feels hopeless. Like, okay, well, I don't know how they did that, but I just could never do that. I want to,
yeah.
but I can't. And I'm going to argue. I'm going to really push back here hard. You can't because of your pride and
Hmm.
because you want to hold on to your pain. And the only way you can truly be free is if you're willing to let go of that pain.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
No, it's such a
that's a
powerful
tough one to
point.
say. Yeah,
It is, but I think some of these things need to be said sometimes, and
yeah,
I think you're right. I think there are reasons why we don't forgive, but they're all on us. Um, if it's a command of Christ, then it's possible. It's not
yeah,
like Christ will say, "Well, you need to forgive," or by the way, you're not going to find a way to do it. But this is where I think cultural Christianity falls down, because in Christ is where you find the strength, right, to do these things. So
yeah.
I'm
And he
intrigued.
says, and he says, "Do you trust me?" Right.
Mm,
So when you say, "I'm not going to forgive," what you're saying is, I don't trust that God ultimately is just,
mm-hmm,
and that in the end, all will be made right.
mm-hmm.
So because we've been offended, and so we want justice. We want that person to come to account for whatever they've done.
Yeah.
The thing is God's the judge.
Mm-hmm,
And if he's already forgiven them, what right do we have to withhold what he's already given them freely and given us freely?
mm-hmm,
Like, read Romans slowly. Romans 5, right?
mm,
Um, there's got to be a humbling of our own hearts to realize we don't have the right or authority.
yeah.
And that's tough, because it's not to say that your hurt and your pain isn't real. It's that what you're saying is I trust God for the justice on his timing, and I give him my hurt and my pain.
Yeah.
And my prayer is that more and more people, especially within the church, that profess the name of Christ, would really truly make this leap.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'm with you. I'm
Sorry.
with you.
Yeah.
So I'm intrigued to know, Jonathan, you're talking about your daughters. You're also involved in something called Fathers for Fathers. Was there a connection there? What
Yeah.
is Fathers for Fathers, and how did that come about?
Yeah. So my dad, just after my 15th birthday, he drowned. Him and I were scuba diving here in Nova Scotia, and I lost him. I got him to the beach, but I was not able to save him.
Oh, wow.
And that kickstarted a very painful period of my life, a very formative year for a young man, where I didn't have a father. I was fatherless. What ensued in the years after that, my mom remarried very quickly. My stepdad and I obviously didn't get along. I was very angry. I was suffering from trauma and PTSD around my dad drowning, blamed myself, a lot of guilt with that. Couldn't accept that it was my fault, so then chose to blame God and walk away from him. And so when you fast forward, you go through a divorce, your spouse, says, hey, this isn't for me, there's further abandonment. And then when you start having difficulties with your teenage daughters, there's this constant theme of hurt and brokenness. And I started looking at the stats on divorce and just where things are going and the impact on men. And I thought about how broken I was and how broke I got. And I thought, we're doing a good job in the church with programs of behavioral modification and a lot of left brain, copy, rinse, and repeat. We're not doing a good job of this, like really allowing people to be vulnerable and honest. And divorce rates are, I don't know what they are in the UK, but in North America, they're 58%. The numbers are no different in the church, which in and of itself should be alarming, because it tells us that there doesn't seem to be much difference between the church and the world, and there should be. And but I started really digging into the stats and became very alarmed at the rate at which men, in the wake of divorce, if they're not actively engaged in their kids' lives, if they don't stay in there, how badly they spiral. And this is going to be an alarming stat. But in Canada, North America, well, I'll use Canada. Canada, only 13% of men get shared custody. So I knew God had moved in my life, and that my kids had a dad who had shared custody, and I was able to coach their baseball team, their volleyball team, and stay very actively engaged in their life. And but not a lot of dads have that success. And what happens is, if they don't, they end up being that every other weekend dad. We start painting these guys as deadbeat dads, and simply put, the suicide rates amongst men who end up alienated from their kids, which is 15 out of the 58 of divorces. So it's too high a number. They end up killing themselves. 1 in 3 of them kill themselves.
Wow.
So I thought, okay, Lord, these are men that you died for, that you went to the cross for. I know your view on the family unit. I know Ephesians 5:25 says, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church, and be prepared to present her. So I know that the order of things is God, our wives, our kids, and so forth. But what do we do when 6 out of 10 dads are trying to do that in the wake of a divorce, and the whole thing's been discombobulated, and they feel hopeless? And but then I thought about men who've outlived their own children, guys that lost their dad when they're young, guys that never knew their dad because they didn't know their dad for whatever reason. And I just started to realize that men are having a very difficult time figuring out what godly masculinity looks like. And I didn't feel equipped to throw my hat in the ring. I can tell you that right now. But notwithstanding that, the Lord really put it on my heart to start Fathers for Fathers. And he gave me a pretty clear vision of what it should be and what it should look like. And I'm following it as obediently as I can. But in short, it was, you need to be a flag bearer for men. I want you to get these broken men that the world's really writing off as deadbeat dads or whatever they are. Whether they're into porn or substance abuse, but there's way too many men falling prey to this victimhood mindset, or they're villains. And God's called men to be heroes, not villains or victims. And so basically, I look at us like almost like a pseudo church, where our job is to be a stretcher bearer or an ambulance for the church. Get the broken men, figure out where they're wounded, as John Eldredge says, get them stable and get them to where they can get real fellowship and discipleship with the church. And so we're doing all kinds of cool stuff. Men's hikes. We're working on a 12-week immersive study, like an alpha program for men, by men, that's built on a military phase training structure that'll appeal to men, with lots of football
That sounds
analogies and
amazing. Yeah.
soccer analogies and baseball analogies and military analogies, like stuff that men will resonate with. We're giving them 2 options, not 5, because we all know that, I was recently with a bunch of guys at a retreat, and they said, okay, we're cleaning up ourselves. There's like a blue cleaning agent and a pink cleaning agent and orange. By the time they got to the 4th cleaning agent, you could tell every guy in the room had glazed over and was confused, right? So the immersive study, it's like you got 2 options: either Jesus on the throne or you on the throne.
Yeah.
What's it going to be, right? So yeah, we're just basically trying to go after the broken man, and kind of like in the model of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, we're not going to fix broken family courts, and we're not going to fix the porn industry or stop it. But what we can do is we can go after the victims, and the victims are men and their families.
Yeah.
So we just feel called to try and stabilize the men, get them off this villain victim mindset and back
Yeah.
into hey, like, I am called by God for a purpose in society, and it's not too late.
That's
So,
fantastic. I love the fact you're
yeah.
doing that, and I'm stoked, man, because I hear a lot about male suicide, because more men commit suicide. I think it's 75% male, 25% female, something like that is the stat, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And men, we've gone to great lengths, and I think quite rightly so, to get men to talk. To encourage men to talk, to try and end the sort of the size of male suicide. And I think we've done an okay job there in some respects. Obviously, there's always room for improvement, but it turns out when you look at the data, it's not that men aren't talking. It's just that no one's really listening, or the solutions aren't there to help them. And so when you talk about how 1 in 3 are committing suicide because they don't have access to kids, that's not a talking problem. This is a problem. Whether I talk about it or whether or not, I've still got the problem that I'm estranged from my
Exactly,
kids, right?
exactly. And the question is, well, what did you do, and what can you do to fix about it? Well, come on, man. You don't think this guy is sat night after night after night, drink after drink after drink, asking, what can I do? What we need to do is start asking the right questions.
Yeah.
And guys are doers. Like
Yeah.
Typically, men need a challenge. They need to provide, protect, pursue, and fight for something. And so we got to take that energy and we got to channel it somewhere, because a despondent man is a destructive man, whether he's destroying himself or others around him.
Yeah.
But a hopeful man is a force of nature. And so, like I just keep continually being alarmed as I talk to guys. And the common theme is hope. They've got no hope. I got no hope. You don't understand, right? You don't understand. I had a guy say to me, you don't understand. I'm like, try me, because I've probably gone through it, which is probably why God's calling me to this ministry. And sure enough, he's like, well, this is what's happened in my business, and this is what I'm up against. And like, I don't know how I'm going to keep the banks happy, And I'm like, all right, let's work our way through this, man. Like one piece at a time. Let's start peeling back the onion. So talking is good, but once we're done talking, this guy needs an action plan.
Yeah.
Right. He needs something that he can start doing.
Yeah.
That he has an element of control over, that is not dependent on outside elements that he doesn't have control over. And at the end of the day, we're not trying to say, hey, Tony Robbins, you can do this. What we're trying to say is you can't do this. So one of the things you have to do is surrender, or you are going to perish. But in that surrender, there are things you can do to pursue the Lord. There's things you can do to cast your cares on him. And there's things you can do to just start actively taking care of yourself, because most guys are left-brained, right?
Yeah.
Are you exercising? Stop drinking the Coke Zero. Put down the caffeine. Stop with the cigarette. Why are you drinking that alcohol, right? Like just be deliberate about where you're putting your time and your energy. Are you starting your day with the Lord? Or are you starting at sleep deprived because you're up till 2 a.m. watching whatever it is you're watching, right? So, we just want to be flag bearers for men. And, in a military context, flag bearers were never armed, right? They ran next to the general unarmed, and yet they were the prize target on the field. Like if you can take down the flag bearer, you stop the entire army of men from marching.
Yeah.
And so it just became really evident to me that men need a flag bearer again, and the church needs to be that flag bearer. But I think sometimes we just need somebody with a stretcher to like triage these guys and get them to the church.
Yeah.
And it is literally the embodiment of being a fisher of men. Let's go and get these guys. Like I literally had a vision, Matt, that we would advertise on Pornhub, right?
Fantastic.
Fathers for Fathers, right? Like it's like, where are we going to get these guys, right? Like we could put signage up at all the liquor stores, right? Let's go where the broken men are hanging out, and let's not shame them for being broken. Let's challenge them to step away from what they know is never ever going to fill the void.
Yeah.
No matter how hard they try.
That's so powerful. Let's not shame them for being broken, which I think is very cultural, actually, at the moment. To shame men in so many ways, and actually, let's not shame them. Let's call them. Let's let's call the men to. I like the phrase you use, biblical masculinity, because again, I have 2 boys and a girl. I have 3 kids, Jonathan. Right, my 2 boys, 22 and 20, and I look at what they're faced with in terms of outside of the church, especially how at the moment it is definitely not cool to be a man in so many ways, and this is not a criticism. This is just an observation of society.
It's just where we are in human history.
It is.
Yeah.
And it's very different to what I grew up in.
Yeah,
and to the point where you almost have to feel like you have to apologize sometimes for being a man. And I think it's the other way around. I agree. I think what this world needs more than anything right now are biblical men, biblical fathers especially. Yeah. Even if you're not fathering, I'm a big fan of this idea of fathering. I said it to my son, 22, spent 10 days with him in the States a couple of weeks ago, which was just beautiful. And I'm like, I know you're 22, but you need to think about what it looks like to spiritually father other men. Teenagers who will look up to you and think they're cool. They're not going to look to me. They're going to think, oh, you're an old guy, you don't know nothing. But they're going to look to you and think, oh, you're cool. And I think when men step up into that call of fatherhood, not only to their own kids, but to a hurting world, I think the world changes in so many beautiful ways.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at the very first fatherhood story in the Bible, right, it's God and Adam, right? And just as a side note, God had 2 sons and one went wayward. So guys, stop beating yourself up, right? The creator of the universe was batting 500. And thank God for the other son, Christ, right? But my point is there's something very special around a father-son relationship and our Heavenly Father and how he loves men. And he has a purpose for men. And it's not something to be ashamed of or to back away from. As a matter of fact, it's a burden. It's stewardship. He's saying, I want you to be willing. Ephesians 5:25, love the church, love your wives like Christ loved the church. Well, Christ died for the church.
Yeah.
What he's saying is, love your wives, be so submitted to your wives that you would die for her. And she's the number one most important relationship in your life.
Yeah.
Right? Not like if you're not doing that, nothing else matters. Right? So like that's how I interpret it. And then I was talking to a buddy of mine this winter and I said, here's the thing, like we need to die to our flesh, like not physically die, but die to our flesh for our wives. So when a man starts to do that, it's like, well, what does that look like? Well, it's the like this rite of passage where we go through this journey of sanctification where we allow God to change us into the kind of men that he actually is proud of and can use to transform the world. And so, I'll say this to the guys that are listening that don't have a good rap sheet, because I don't have a good rap sheet. All right. I've been divorced and I got 2 teenage daughters that are like, you suck. Okay. Right. Here's the thing though. What I am is a guy who's sold out for Christ and willing to be coached and willing to continue to say, I don't want to be a villain and I don't want to be a victim. So Lord, help me to be a hero. And what does that
Yeah.
look like? So Satan will say, well, this is who you are, right? Based on what you've done or not done or how you failed. But what God says is, no, this is who you are. And I tell you what your identity is. Romans 8, Galatians 3:26, Ephesians, Colossians. So we need to embrace that identity.
Yeah.
Like the Apostle Paul said, and was it 2 Corinthians 10:4, take your thoughts captive.
Yeah.
Like men are built to take our thoughts captive. So why are we not doing that?
Yeah.
And I think it's really important that we say, look, I'm not my CV, because the fact is like, look at David.
Mm-hmm.
What a terrible CV.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yet
Yeah.
God said, here's a man after my own heart. Well, why was he a man after his own heart? Read Psalm 51. That's why, right? He said, against you and you alone have I sinned. Restore unto me the joy of my salvation. My bones are like dust. This is a guy who understood that his rap sheet didn't matter and that he had no purpose or value apart from God, right? And so, like, you got, let's say 50% of the people listening to this are women and 50% are men. And of the 50% of their men, 10% are perfect and 90% suck.
Yeah.
So I'm going to talk to the 90% that suck, because actually the 10% suck also. They just don't know it.
They've
But,
started the revelation. Yeah.
that's their problem, actually, is that they don't know it. But the 9 and 10 guys that are listening, God doesn't care about your broken rap sheet.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what he cares is, are you going to own it?
Yeah.
Right. So David said, against you and you alone have I sinned. David owned his sin. He owned the consequences of it, and he knew he was going to have to live with it.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't blame God for his sin. He didn't blame God for the fact that his house was never free from the sword, as Nathan said, or that like Absalom rebelled. He knew that this was a product of his choices, but he knew God was the only way forward despite his flaws.
Yeah.
And, like when David wept over Absalom, I think any father or mother who's had a child go wayward or astray will understand why David wept over Absalom. And he wept over Absalom because he knew that he had failed, and it was his responsibility. It was his sin that had created the environment by which Absalom could pursue his rebellious agenda. And so there was an ownership. There was a genuine, I am as a father responsible for my son hanging from a tree and being decapitated today. And so, but what did he do? He wept, he rose, and he carried on.
Yeah.
Right. And I think what we do today is we just stay there and we weep and we allow Satan to just absolutely obliterate us in the dust. We need to be, the men listening need to be like David, King David, and say, no, I'm going to get up.
Yeah.
I'm going to accept it, and I'm going to continue to move forward and serve the Lord and finish well.
Yeah.
Right. And that would be my call to action, is stop looking at your rap sheet. Stop listening to what the world says about you. Stop listening to what Satan says about you, and start listening to what God says.
Yeah. That's so powerful.
And what he says is you are bought and paid for, that you are special, that he literally, Christ hung on that cross and thought about you, and God looked at Christ and saw Christ's blood shedding for you, where you are set free of the consequences eternally for that sin. So why would you ever pick that up again? Like why would you in your pride say, no, I hear this all the time from guys, well, I'm not good enough. Dude, you're saying that God doesn't know what he's doing when he did this for you, and that you're not good enough, but every other guy he bled for is good enough. No, you are good enough. That's why he did it. There's nothing more amazing than knowing that Matt, Jonathan, Brian, Fred, and George, whoever's listening, you are being pursued by the creator of the universe, and you were being pursued before you were ever born. And I would even argue, and I'm not a 5-point Calvinist, but I would even argue he knew you were going to mess this up. Yeah. Right? Like, what he wants to know is, are you going to run back to him, your father, and cry, Abba, Abba, right? Yeah. And he loves contrition. Like when he sees a man like David saying, I sinned against you, and really own it, man, I'm telling you, our Father, he'll storm right into the room and like take on the
Oh,
giants for us.
yeah. I wonder, actually, listening
Yeah.
to you talk, bringing it back to the beginning, I wonder when you wrote
Yeah.
that letter to your ex-wife asking for forgiveness, whether actually
Yeah.
that was part of you owning it.
Oh, for sure. I've even shared this with other guys. I think of every relationship we have as a triangle, and God is at the top of the triangle, and then
Hmm.
there's Jonathan, and then whoever that other person is.
Hmm.
And the question invariably is, are we trusting that person to God? Or are we trying to, hold on to this relationship and whatever tensions or bitterness or
Hmm.
whatever's there? But at the end of the day, we need to belay them to God and trust that God is ultimately contending with them the same way he's contending with us. And it's not on us to fix them,
Hmm.
it's on him to. We need to just be open and honest with him only. And so, yeah, for me, that was him bringing me into my Psalm 51 moment,
Yeah.
right? And he had brought me there for the 12 years prior, but it was like he knew, okay, this is the moment. This is the moment where you're either going to rise up like David and carry on with me 100%, or you're going to continue to hold on to this. And we can do this for as long as you want, Jonathan, because I love you and I'm your father. But man, oh man, are you ever missing out,
Hmm.
right? And I'll tell you, man, I am so eternally thankful that I wrote those letters.
Mm. Yeah. Super
Yeah.
powerful. Super powerful.
Yeah.
Jonathan, listen, I'm aware of time, and I hate to say it because I feel like there is so much to this conversation I would like to dig into some more. I think we've barely begun to touch the surface on issues like pornography. I think
Yeah.
that would be a really fascinating conversation. It sounds like you got some great insight into that. Carry on the conversation about biblical masculinity. So I wonder whether we schedule another date and
Well, I'll
carry
tell
on the
you,
conversation.
I'd love to do that. And I like if you want to talk about pornography, my buddy Josh Broom, he was the number one porn star in LA for 9 years.
Wow.
Radically born again. He's out to destroy the porn industry now. He's an ordained minister. Just wrote an amazing
Goodness me.
book. So we could get Josh on. And yeah, I mean, dude, we could do this all day long. I mean, this is what I'm doing. I'm going after the men, and we got to go into the darkest recesses of where they're hanging out and get them. I'm doing the same thing with divorces. I'm on the board for Teen Challenge Canada, David Wilkerson. So substance abuse. I mean, let's be honest. You can almost pick the guy's things. Some are workaholics.
Yeah.
That's what I was. Some love to chase women, some love to chase adventure and adrenaline rushes, but like it's not hard to see what they're doing to medicate their pain or to fill the void. And like that's what we're going after with Fathers Fathers. Love to come back on anytime, Matt. Yeah, like um, I really think that we are doing the world a favor. We're doing the women, our children, a favor if we can get these
Mm.
broken men back into the ranks of healed and whole men
Yeah.
who, you know, um, can honestly say, I am no longer that man and I am a new creation.
Yeah.
And we don't know who those men are going to be, but they're out there, and we owe it to our Lord and Savior to go get them.
Absolutely. Listen,
Yeah.
Jonathan, if people want to connect with you, if they want to find out more about Fathers for Fathers,
Yeah.
what's the best way
Yeah.
to do that, brother?
Hit our website, fathersforfathers.org. You can check us out on Facebook, Instagram. Our handles are all very simple, like Fathers for Fathers. You can hit us up on Twitter. If you message us, I will message you back. We've grown quite a bit. So a good friend of mine, Amelia Bishop, my wife's best friend, she's like basically being the concierge. We're trying to get 300 men volunteer for our 1-800 number. We have a 1-800 number that is live. I don't think it's in Europe, but it's anywhere in North America.
Mm-hmm.
And guys are calling in all the time. We're trying to get our Gideon's 300 guys to man the phones. I've almost got a guy every other day signing up to man the phone. So when you call, you are getting a David who has bled and done battle, and that guy will pray with you. So yeah, man, check us out. We're full steam ahead going after the guys.
Fantastic. Fantastic. We will, of course, link to all of that information in the show notes as well. But Jonathan, loved the conversation, brother. I love what you're doing, and I love what God is doing in your life, man. I love the story, and I can see God in it, and I can sense God in it, and I am thoroughly grateful for meeting you today. So thank you for coming on, and thank you for sharing your heart.
You got it, Matt. It's my pleasure, man. And we got to get you over here. No joke. We're doing men's hikes in the Cape Breton Highlands of Nova Scotia.
Yeah.
I've got a guy flying from the UK actually joining us. I got a guy coming from Mexico. So if anybody wants to join one of our men's hikes, we'll take them and test your mettle. And I got a couple of Navy SEALs and some Army Rangers coming up in September. So that our next men's hike is September 19th to the 21st in for the French, Nouvelle-Écosse, for the Canadians, Nova Scotia, and for my friends across the pond, New Scotland.
Fantastic. Well, I look forward to that.
Right, bless you, buddy.
Yeah, you too, man. You too. Well, Jonathan, thank you. That was great. Loved hearing your heart, brother. Thanks for coming on and sharing. It was really good. Thank you.
God bless, buddy.
All right,
let me know if you want to come hiking. All right.
Yeah, I will do.
Okay, bye. Okay, bye.
Bye, mate. Bye.
And just like that, we've reached the end of another fascinating conversation. Remember to check out Crowd Online Church at www.crowd.church. Don't forget to subscribe to What's the Story on your favorite podcast app. We've got a treasure trove of inspiring stories coming your way, and we'd hate for you to miss any of them. What's the Story is a production of Crowd Online Church. Our fantastic team, including Anna Kettle, Matt Edmundson, Tanya Hutzelak, and myself, Suther Fainin, work behind the scenes to bring these stories to life. Our theme song is a creative work of Josh Edmundson. If you're interested in the transcript or show notes, head over to our website, whatsthestorypodcast.com. And while you're there, sign up for our free newsletter to get all the goodness delivered straight to your inbox. That's all from us this week. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode. Bye for now.